Recording. Let's start that one more time. Okay, so thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today on a Friday. Um, I have with me today Professor Jason Gulya from Berkeley College. Let me here click entire screen from beginning. Yep. Okay, here we go. So Professor Jason Gulya from Berkeley College. Jason focused on the role of AI in higher education, what AI means for the future of writing and communication, and conceptualizing academic integrity for the new world. Before I start, I want to thank, again, this is not just a one-person thing. Here at City Tech, I work closely with the Faculty Commons and my department, A2L, and I just want to thank Faculty Commons and the team at A2L to putting this together. It takes a whole team to do this kind of work. And since it's our last AI Roundtable discussion series for the semester, I can't believe we made it till the end, but I just wanted to end with a bang and have Professor Gulya with us today. And I really appreciate you having being here with us today. So real quick, I'm going to first share Professor Gulya's website. Let me copy that and post that into the chat. Oops, there it is. Let me just click on that. So if you want to learn more about Professor Gulya and the amazing work that he's doing at Berkeley, you can find him here. Let me put that real quick in the chat so you can have that. Here he goes. Also, I want to promote Professor Gulya's book. It's on Amazon. It's titled Artificial Intelligence, Real Literacy. So let me copy that link as well. If anyone's interested, they can get the book on Amazon, and I'll post that as well in the chat. Let's see. Let's do that real quick before we start. All right, so the two links are there. His Professor Gulya's website, if you want to learn more about him, or you can find him on LinkedIn. That's how I found him. And his book is what is also there on the chat. So real quick, I'm going to read a little bit of a quick bio about Professor Gulya, and then we'll begin. So Jason Gulya is a professor of English and media communications at Berkeley College. He teaches courses on reading and writing, the humanities, and artificial intelligence. Dr. Gulya has worked with colleges and universities all around the world as a consultant and keynote speaker. He focuses on the role of AI in higher education, what AI means for the future of writing and communication, and conceptualizing academic integrity for this new world. Dr. Gulya is the author of Allegory in Enlightenment, Britain Literacy Abominations, 2022, and co-author of Artificial Intelligence, Real Literacy, a practical guide to using AI for 10 evidence-based literacy practices in education. He has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and several other major publications. He was named an innovator to watch by Innovate 100. Dr. Gulya holds a BA and an MA and a PhD from Rutgers University in New Jersey, where he received several teaching awards at Berkeley College. He was selected as Faculty of the Year in 2020 and served as the faculty speaker at the 2021 commencement ceremony. So thank you, Dr. Gulya, for joining us today. And yeah, let's begin. So, by the way, here's a book if anyone does, if you want to see what the cover looks like. So it's there, and it also, and the link as well as in the chat. So if you want to find it and purchase the book. But I wanted to start the conversation today with just asking Jason. He has several roles at Berkeley. I just wanted to tell us a little bit about the things that you're doing at Berkeley. You have a hand teaching an English course, but you also are, working academic integrity, but also you're also doing the AI task force. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing at Berkeley and how's it going over there for you guys?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Jose, for inviting me. And this is going to be a pretty informal conversation. So if you want to write things in the chat, write questions, write comments, go for it. I'm not going to do the whole slide thing. I'm going to try to be as real as I possibly can with working through some of these things. Yeah, and one of the things I think is really interesting about our college, but is the case for basically I mean so many colleges and universities in higher ed, is that we all have these different hats. So I mean, my full-time job is I'm a full-time professor, so I teach a 5-5-5 course load. So we are a trimester system. And I wrote in the chat, I'm very envious of anyone who's going into the summer now. Our semester just started. We are done August 8th or something like that. So it's constantly teaching. And I teach online, I teach in person, I teach hybrid, which is, for a lot of us now becoming the standard. We're just taking on these different modalities, especially post COVID. And so I have that, which gives me a particular kind of perspective, right? It's very much about, well, what can I do right now? This is where kind of, my foot hits the concrete. I really can't afford to be too abstract with things, because in the end, like we can, I can go and debate about AI in higher education forever, right? For hours and hours and hours. But hey, I got to teach tomorrow. I have to go to a classroom and deliver something to students and have that learning experience. And I think that kind of like changes my approach. So that's part of what I do. And as Jose, you mentioned, I'm also the chair of our AI and academic integrity committee. And there it's very, very different. It has a very, very different feel to it. So really what our job is I mean, very concretely, to adapt our academic integrity policy, which applies to students and professors, so both students and faculty. And that feels a lot different for a couple of reasons, right? One is that we're giving something that we're asking people to stick to, right? And this is where my hats can kind of come sometimes into conflict with each other, right? Because I might have my own approach, my own policy in my classes. It may not work for every faculty member, right? It's not like I can just take that as a model. I kind of have to, work with others to create this academic integrity policy that then is going to apply to everyone. So you have, and the real struggle, at least for me, is trying to figure out that balance, right? Because when you're doing that sort of work, you need to balance, one, having this concrete policy that people can look at, right? This physical document. But then within that, right, within that policy, a lot of leeway, right? Because one of the things that is kind of a sticking point is that a certain approach to using AI might work well in a writing class, but not in a science class, right? Not in a physics class. It might not work well in a geography class, right? And so, and a lot of this just, it depends on the professor. It depends on the discipline. One of the things that I think we've really learned is that even something like AI literacy has a disciplinary component to it, right? And to a certain extent, like academic integrity also has a disciplinary component to it. So how do you find that balance? That's been an ongoing struggle for me. And then I'm also on our college's AI task force, and there too, a big difference, right? When we're talking about AI and academic integrity policy, it's very concrete. It's about a particular document. But for the AI task force, it's about a lot of it, sometimes pretty abstract conversations about where can the college go, right? What direction are we moving in? What kind of stuff can we do? What sort of initiatives, right? And sometimes they're very concrete, but sometimes it's really about like, the abstract conversations about what to do with agentic AI, right? What this means for higher ed, stuff like that. And so I'm constantly, for me, when I move between these different roles, I'm going back and forth between these very, very concrete considerations and these pretty abstract considerations. And it's hard to figure out how separate they are because they start to feed into each other. But I think that it's a result of higher ed's tendency to just have a lot of committees and kind of compartmentalize, and then you have to move back and forth between them. Kind of breaks my brain a little bit.
It's interesting. These policies are formulated, and then you have to bring it back into that classroom as a professor. And so, but you have your lens on each, so I think it's interesting that from your perspective, having interesting perspective on all three, and then you kind of like bring them together and somehow it works. And if it doesn't work, you got to go back to the drawing board, try to figure it out. And not only that, but you also bring in other faculty members. You also bring in the students, right? It's a collective effort to get these policies right the first and get them to work.
It
Uh,
becomes this weird professional identity when you're moving between these different roles and switching, right? And then like somewhere in the Venn diagram of it all is me, right? That's the weirdness of the whole thing.
yeah, no, definitely. Um, I've been following you for such a long time now, and one of the things that caught my attention, I think maybe this was the one thing that one of the top things that when I read your post on the product centered mindset, and I thought it was fascinating because as teachers, in especially in higher education, the majority of the professors, educators come from the field or profession, and they're not really trained as educators. They come from let's say, computer field, and they come in, they teach students from that perspective. But when I heard your interpretation of what the product center mindset was, I was like, oh, wow, this is a fresh breath of air. And so maybe can you tell us a little bit about what the product center mindset means and if you could describe it to us?
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm continually reminded of, or I guess I'll say continually learning, is just how embedded it is in higher ed.
Mhm.
So the idea of focusing on process, right? That other side of just how we create things, what sort of steps we go through, right? To go from A to B to C and suddenly create a product. Like that's not new, right? In writing studies in the humanities, we've had that really, it's been big since the 1970s. When people really think about it, this is how you, especially in writing, this is how you teach process, right? So it's not new, but I do think that there's a gap. There's a gap between that sort of scholarship and writing studies and what many of us do in the classroom. So when I was an undergraduate, I had a professor who I loved. Um, and I took a class with, I think, 150 other students, right? Giant lecture class. And when we handed in our papers, and right, this is when you had to physically print it out, you sent it to the computer lab, you printed it out, you stapled it, you had to hand it in at the end of one class. There were no lates. If you just missed it, you missed it. That was it. No one was emailing him, no one was uploading into anything into an LMS. But when he got this stack of papers, what he would do, I don't have much paper around me. I have this. So he would take a blank sheet of paper and he would completely cover the name and the title. Anything in the header would be covered. And so his point was that, and I totally understand this, he didn't want any other knowledge besides the product being handed to him. He didn't want that to affect how he saw it. He didn't want it to bias him. He didn't want to say, well, Jason wrote this, so I think, oh, this is going to be really bad, right? Really good, or somewhere in the middle, right? So, and he did that. But what ends up happening is it just becomes a product that we are looking at, just, a one and done thing, handed in and looked at based off of quality, right? And this is the model for many of us of traditional grading, right? That's what we do. We say, it doesn't matter who wrote it, it doesn't matter what process went into it. I'm going to look at those 5 pages, and based off of quality, it's an 85, and that's it, whether we're using a rubric or not. And so that's, I'm really starting to learn just how pervasive that is, right? Because it's not just about assignments, right? It's also about how we present ourselves. I was having a conversation with a student yesterday, and it was really sort of interesting because she was asking me questions about how my first class went, right? What my process of learning how to teach was. She was very, very curious about it, which was awesome. And I started to kind of think about how, when I was even a graduate student, I was really taught like the goal is to feel like a finished product when you stand up there, right? Like I'm now the expert that has gone through this long process, and I'm not going to really poke at that by focusing on process. And so I think that it's just so embedded. And then when we look at trying to walk students through, like, how do you create, right? What sort of steps do you take? That's what I think is really interesting. And that's what I spend a lot of my time doing. And that is a focus that, yes, has a place within writing studies and the humanities, but also cuts across different disciplines, right? The way that you build something, the way that you build knowledge, that's where the learning really, really happens. And that's been implicit for a long time, I think, that for many of us, even if you're just talking about a formal paper, yes, we want to see that you can write a paper. But one of the reasons we wanted to do that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, was that we assumed a process based off of the product. If I saw a paper where there's a pretty good argument in it, well, I'm pretty sure that student now knows how to argue, right? So it's kind of process based, it's kind of skill based. If the paper had a good analysis of some quotes, I could say pretty confidently 10 years ago, well, I'm pretty sure that student can analyze quotes and can analyze evidence. But one of the things that's happened with AI is it's getting harder and harder to do that. It's getting harder to assume a skill or a process based off of what we are given, what is in front of us, especially when we have I forget the exact number, but it's like in the 80, maybe even low 90% of college students who are using AI programs pretty regularly. And that really, really muddies up the assumptions we can make about process and skills based off of product. So yeah, that's my general overview of it.
No, that's great. And in the whole process, in your when you're designing assignments, do you incorporate scaffolding into the assignment in your assignments, or how do you see scaffolding in the spec in the idea in the process of designing your assignments?
Yeah, so scaffolding is extremely important. One of the things that I learned is that if I'm going to go into teaching process, many of my students have never really tried to do that. That if I go and I do a version of this, I ask students, create a project and create a process for it, right? One of the first things that happens is, well, how do I do that? Right? Like what does that even look like? And there's a lot of coaching that needs to happen. And so I think there, in my mind, and this isn't going to get everything, but I think it gets some of the big moves. I think when it comes to scaffolding and how to get to process focused teaching through scaffolding, right? I think we need to make a distinction. We have scaffolding, right? That is very much just, I'm going to model it for you. So this is where we really get to something like a professor created process, right? So for example, I might tell a student, I want you to read something, right? And you can do this regardless of class. I want you to read something and annotate it. Then I'm going to give you a custom chatbot, and it's going to put pressure on you, right? A Socratic chatbot that's going to ask you questions and you have to defend it, right? And then we're going to do a reflection right here. And so there, right, it is a very short, it is a kind of mini process you can do in a week, right? You can do it in a weekly module. And it's just about modeling, right? And I ask my students, let's look at that, right? Is this a good way to use the technology for you? Did it empower you? Did you feel like you started to lose power, right? You can do all of that sort of work. And that's one kind of scaffolding. And there's another kind of scaffolding, which isn't totally separate, which is really just what I call, agency-rich scaffolding, right? So in that first one, when I'm creating the process for them and saying, do this thing, it's about modeling. There's not a ton of agency there, but it's a model that they can use. But then for my classes for a big project, I might have an agency-rich scaffold, right? So here it's less structured, but it gives them more power over what they're creating. So for a lot of my classes, and I mentioned like the first couple of parts of this already, I might ask a student, based off of what we've done so far, create a project, right? So one of the big principles of teaching process is the student has to be able to choose what the project looks like, right? Have a lot of agency there. Not complete leeway, but some agency over what that looks like. So a student creates the project, creates the process, right? So you want to create a screenplay for Wall-E 2, right? I've had students do this, right? So that's what you want to create. What process is going to get you there? And that's even at that point, at that early part of this assignment, I might ask students, where do you think AI may fit in? Do you think it's going to fit in the brainstorming phase for you? Do you think you just want to get the draft down and then you're going to use it to maybe you create an outline, right? Or, whatever process they think helps themselves out. And the point is that it's a guess. I recognize that they might not stick to this, but they're creating essentially their own scaffold, right? That's why I call it an agent. I give them the steps, but they're creating the steps within there. That's why there's so much agency here. A student then implements that process, and they partway through hit pause and reflect and self-assess it, right? How are things going, right? What can do you need to pivot, right? What sort of criteria are you trying to hit here? And so that's, in metacognition, that's reflection in action, right? You actually hit pause in the middle of doing something and kind of figure out what's going on there. And we build from there. And so that is a student created process, but as a structure for that, I have scaffolding there. But the real trick is that with that sort of scaffold, it's much more about using those earlier models, and then students can create and have much more agency along the way. It's less about structure. It's more about building a structure with the student. Now, you can't do that for everyone. It's just for every assignment, it's just too big. But I think you might be able to, or I do. I run it a couple of times a semester, and then you try to balance it and build from there.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. We jumped a little bit ahead, but since we're talking about assignment design, I wanted to mention the idea that you had. I love this. This was when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. You did something with your class where you had the students use AI to help them create a rubric, and so the rubric was then used for the students to self-assess. And so I guess they went into an AI chatbot. They went ahead and created the rubric. Then that rubric was then used to self-assess and where they were in the project, I guess, right? Am I saying that correctly? Uh,
Yeah.
but this was the part that blew me away when you wrote. You said you kind of said something like the reason why I did this was I wanted to disrupt how students think about assessments. All right. Because now they're involved in the process and they're actually thinking about, oh my gosh, there's some times where I see professors that have rubrics, and very few do use rubrics, and I think it's great to use rubrics. But then sometimes some that do use rubrics will never share the rubric with the students. Sometimes I was like, the idea is transparency. You want the students to know what you're looking for and the goals of the project are, so they can understand what you're looking for and then do what you're asking them to do, and then provide the evidence of learning. But I think what you did here is you flipped the narrative here. You're like, okay, look, I don't think even did you even tell them that what you were doing here, or how did that go?
I mean, I told them a little bit. And so I had this, I won't call it an existential crisis, but I had this moment. I'll just call it a moment of reflection. So I was always, when I was a grad student, I was encouraged to use rubrics that were always given to me, right? I was never asked to create my own rubric. It was just handed to me by the department, use it to assess student work. And then when I got my current position, we are encouraged to use rubrics for certain things. And so I was creating a rubric for some assignment years ago, and I kind of thought about how much of a learning process that was for me. I learned so much from creating the rubric, right? I go through and I look at what they're creating. I'm making decisions about what is of value here, what we are trying to hit, right? If we're trying to hit, concrete detail or whatever it is, why is that important? What does that look like? What does a great example look like? A good example look like, right? And I felt like I wanted my students to have that learning process, right? Like, why I'm learning all this stuff. Wouldn't it be cool? Students could do that, right? And they could, as they're creating their own project and process, they could figure out, well, this is what I'm really valuing here. And the other reason I started to do this was that when suddenly I had classes, when I started to teach process more and more, when I was giving these very different kind of products, right? Some students were doing creative products. Some of them were doing, analytical ones. And I just felt like I couldn't really just take a one size fits all rubric and just use it to evaluate all of these. Um, and so one of the things I do now is I give students, as they're self-assessing, I give them different methods for creating a rubric. And this is where I try to adapt the structure. So for some students, they don't really want or need an AI chatbot to help themselves out. They can say, well, this is my project. And I ask them, let's pick, say, 3 criteria, right? Based off of what you're creating, what are the 3 criteria you really want to, that you value here? Right? What makes a great version of it, a good, and a still working on it version, something like that. Right. And so some students love that. Some students just say, yeah, that's all I need. Right. Now, other students really need, especially if this is the first time they've ever done self-assessment, which I would say is a lot of them, usually all of them. That's where I give them the option of using a chatbot. And so what the chatbot does, and if anyone wants to see this, I'm more than happy to share it. What it basically does is it coaches them through, right? So a student says, this is my project, and it will basically put kind of loving pressure on them and say, well, that's what you're creating. What do you think would make a really, really great example of that? All right. And then it helps them, let's figure out what those criteria are. And then it kind of coaches them through. And so what the chatbot does is it first of all puts that loving pressure on them so that it kind of extrapolates what that student values in that product, that project, whatever you want to call it. And then at the end, does the formatting. It puts it into a table, which honestly, I don't care if an AI does that because that's not where I want the friction. I don't want the friction to be with creating the table because that's not our focus. I want the friction to be creating the criteria, deciding what those are. And I walk students through, and this is pivotal. I tell them, feel free to push against and redirect the chatbot. Because sometimes it might say, well, you want to create a sequel to Wally, and it gets feedback from the student and it creates criteria that may not fit. And I tell them, well, tell it. Right? Say, well, number 3, that's really not my value. I'd rather have this. And so they're in control of the conversation. And that's the kind of productive friction I'm really interested in. And it gives them a rubric that then they use to assess their work. And the other reason that I really like this is it gives me really valuable information. If a student is creating a rubric and using it, whether they're doing it on their own or using the chatbot, and then using it to evaluate themselves, I have pivotal information because then I might learn that there is sometimes a big discrepancy between how I see their work and the student sees their work, right? If they go through and give themselves an excellent for everything, and I look at it and I say, wow, this really, really needs a lot of work. In traditional assessment, I just wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that information because I would just say, this is what I think. You get an A, you get a 95, whatever, off you go. And I want to talk about that with the student, right? Like, this is why you're seeing a way. This is why I'm seeing it another way. And I've had a lot of those conversations. And especially when traditional grading isn't a part of it, I think they can be much more open because it's not going to be, well, I'm right, you're wrong. It's like, let's examine that a little bit. And I felt like without alternative assessment, without students self-assessing themselves, I didn't have access to that information. And I think it's really, really important to be able to see that.
Yeah, I also wanted to bring up because of some of the projects that I think you posted somewhere a list of what your students were doing. I love some of the titles that they that you had listed there. Like there was one where there was an alternative ending for the Green Mile, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I had students do that. Yeah, where John Coffey he's perfectly fine. Yeah, gets whisked away. Yeah.
This one was really cool. An analysis of the character relationship in Stranger Things.
Mm-hmm.
And right away, I was curious to hear what your students thought about the Barbara and how she just disappeared and never, she had that quick, 2 minute, and then next, Barbara's dead, and like, what happened to Barbara? But anyway, then there was
Yeah.
another one which was really interesting. Was you wrote also have the student create a short story based on Dead Poets Society, right?
Yeah.
Did you come up with those or the students, or how did that come about?
No, that's them.
That's all
right?
the
That's
students.
that is them creating it. So giving them some parameters, right? It needs to be somehow linked to what we're discussing, what we're covering. And then from there, giving them a lot of leeway. And all over the place. And I kind of walk them through, it can be a really creative topic, which a lot of those are. Others can be, really just based off of analysis. And, really sort of empower them. And it's very interesting to me when we give students that sort of just umbrella, right? You give the basic structure of it, but you give that umbrella and you get very, very different responses. And those, I think the ones I listed, they were all for one class, right?
Right.
One online class. And so, and two things, right? One, I love that. I love
Mhm.
seeing these different things. Um, and then two, like getting to, student created rubrics and self-assessment, right? I can't imagine taking a single rubric and applying it to all of those things. I
Right.
actually think that would take way more time. I think that would be way more time intensive than having students create their own rubric. I take a quick glance at it and say, well, let's look at those categories with this thing. So it's also it saves me, self-assessment saves me just through, well, it saves me time, saves me energy. But yeah, wildly different approaches, but of their own accord, I didn't give them any of those.
I want to, I want to leave enough time because I know there's going to be probably questions, and so I want to leave enough time for the questions. But before we go to the questions from the audience, um, you know, you mentioned alternative assessments, and to me that sounds like ungrading, and it's kind of like I don't know, it's still taboo yet, but it's the kind of whenever we talk about grades and grading, we've been doing grading for the same way for so long, and for some professors that changing something in a new way could be a little scary, but it's something that we do need to talk about because the fixation on grades, the world that we're living in now is instant gratification. Students are fixated on grades. They're just constantly going to the LMS, the learning management system, just to see if the grade has changed at all or what's going on. So, but then this is perfect segue because we were just talking about your assignments and what you're doing with your assignments and how the students have their own rubrics and they create the rubrics and self-assess. I'm just interested in now in the age of AI and how difficult it is to see what authentic assessments or authentic projects or responses from students really look like, and maybe grades, maybe that is part of the shift, that maybe that's part of the disruptive nature of AI. Now we have to look at grades differently. So what are your thoughts with ungrading?
So is it possible for me to share my screen? It's telling me
Oh,
it's
sure,
disabled share.
sure. Let me
I
do that
said I
right now.
wouldn't do this, but I want to do this.
I for,
I
I
lied.
forced here. Yes, I'll do that real quick. Let me see if I can figure. Oh, here we go. Okay, Chase, here you are. Okay, I think now you should be able to share the screen.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I want to share an example. And many of us, we may be aware of Einstein AI, right? So an AI, this is an agentic AI program. It came and went within, I think, like 48 hours. But basically, what it did was it gave students the ability to use an agentic AI program to just go into the Canvas LMS and just do things. Just go through, look at lectures, look at assignments, submit them on their behalf. Student doesn't really need to be there. And so it got a lot of attention. They got a cease and desist letter, I think within 24 or 48 hours, and was taken down. So, and I think many of us were aware of that example, but I think that we're a little bit less aware of how ongoing that is. That's not done. So I want to talk about an example that happened, I think, like a week and a half ago at University of Notre Dame. So, University of Notre Dame, I think about 10,000 undergraduate students got an email. It went directly into their Notre Dame school account. And they got an email that was a pitch for an AI program. And this is what I want to show you. And so, Jose, can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So, this was covered in the Observer. So, this is an email that students got, right? And again, I think it was about 10,000 undergraduate students. So the very beginning, your cortisol is high, your grades are cooked. That academic comeback isn't looking likely. You know it, I know it. My name's Caden. I study strategic cortisol management here at Notre Dame. I have a 4.0, da 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 da, right? Continues to pitch themselves and their product. All right. So what I want to do is I want to show this. I want to show the very middle here. You're paying $90K a year to be here. The goal is the degree, the network, and actually enjoying college, not memorizing Orgo at 3 a.m. or some useless frameworks for foundations of marketing.
Mm.
So, and this is for Kara AI, right, which has not been shut down, still exists, can still be used. They haven't figured out exactly, I don't think, who Caden Chuang is, right? So, and this is an ongoing thing, and we're seeing more. And I can pop out of my share screen now. So we're seeing more and more things like this. So this is what I call the transactional model of education, right? And I think that it's I won't say surprising, sobering, to see just how pervasive this is. That for many students, and there are so many different contributing factors here, going to college is about getting the grades, getting the degree, using that degree to get a job, right? What you won't see in this email is anything about learning. Right? Learning here, hey, it's sort of a nice thing to do, but not the central part. And so we've created these systems that really prioritize getting the highest grade as possible with as little effort as possible. And this is not an outlier. So you might have seen these. So Grammarly is a program we used to get for our students. They run commercials constantly. So if we want to see this, I can show you. There's a commercial that they put out about 3 weeks ago, has about 24 million views, something like that. And it's the same thing. It's the same kind of pitch. You use our program to get the highest grades as possible with the lowest amount of effort so you can go on a camping trip. That's it. That's like the gist of their commercial. And it's these are everywhere. Yes, I can show you the Grammarly pitch. It would take me 2 seconds to find it. That was from Carol in the comments. So it's not an outline.
But then you had Google Lens come out of nowhere, and then Google Lens, that's another one, and they're just shoving it in our students' faces. Like here, all these tools are just popping up left and right. It's almost like they're forcing it on to us because again they're monetizing these. Obviously, they're getting subscription models and paying for it. But it goes back to your point, transactional, right? Here, so it puts the focus back on the grade. So, how do we change that, and how do we go about that? It has to come through leadership, right?
Yeah, it comes from leadership, and this is where I'm sort of caught. I do think that we're seeing more and more colleges and universities starting to think about things like pass fail, right? In medical programs and nursing programs, that has taken off. I think we lose touch with just how widespread alternative assessment, pass fail, things like that are in things like medical programs, right? They're becoming a standard. Right, whereas traditional grading is becoming less and less common. And so there are little like pockets like that. Often they're very disciplinary bound, but it comes from administration. That's certainly part of it. But the other side of it is this, and this is going to be very context specific. So for many of us within our college classes, we have a lot of leeway. Right. So my experience, and I won't generalize this, right? We don't all have this, and I fully get that. I am told, here are our learning objectives. Here's the college's learning objectives. Here are your course's learning objectives. Bring everything to that. No one's telling me I must use A, B, C, D, F grading consistently. At the end of it, yeah, I have to submit that, and there are ways around that to find some creativity and flexibility there. But I actually, for many of us, at least as in my experience, we might have more space for creativity than we sometimes think. And I've learned to manage my expectations here. Mm-hmm. When I started doing this work and thinking about, let's make learning the center, right? Push against traditional grading, I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to win over all my students with that. And I can't. I had a conversation with a student 2 semesters ago. We did did the whole thing in a 15-week semester. I think we chatted maybe 10, 11 weeks into it. And he was very upfront with me. He said, Professor G, I'm sorry. There's nothing you can do to make me care less about my grade. He said, I take pride in it. I take pride in getting A's. My mom and my dad take pride in me getting A's, right? My cousin takes great pride that I'm going to school and getting all A's. It is such a part of my experience. There's nothing you can do about it. And we chatted about that. And so what I ended up doing is like, all right, cool, cool. So I only have them for 15 weeks, right? Manage those expectations. So let's at least try to align the grading with learning and skills. Let's at least do that, right? And then we had it back and forth and kind of hit, somewhere in the middle in terms of how he was thinking through it. And so if at the end of the day, my students see the challenge to grades, whether or not they agree with it, they don't have to agree with me, right? That's perfectly fine. But if they are given a model where we can poke at grades a little bit, that's enough for me. Because for many of my students, that's never happened before. It's never happened that traditional grades have been challenged. At least if I can show them, oh, there actually is a challenge to it, and this is what it looks like. If I'm able to achieve that, I count that as a win, right? It's just an alternative model, even if it's just something they see in 15 weeks. And that's something I'm trying to come to terms with because I want to be more ambitious and win everyone over, but I can't.
No, I can be, this is a topic that I would love to continue talking, but I know we're running out of time and I want everyone else to ask their questions or jump in comments. So as we turn over to the audience, I welcome everyone who's interested in a quick poll. If there's any tasks that you refuse to offload to AI because they are so important to the process of teaching and learning, please post it on the chat. And as you're typing those your what task you would never offload to AI in the chat. Also, please post your questions or jump on the mic. Again, this is informal. You know how it goes. And we have Jason here, so take the opportunity because I don't know when I'm ever going to get him again. So because he's a very busy man. So please take the opportunity now to ask away or put in the chat anything that you feel you will never offload because it will definitely have a negative effect in that relationship between teacher and student or the learning process. And then we'll see what we get. And we ask Jason the same thing and see what he thinks. We'll put
Yeah,
you
I'm
this.
curious if my answers are going to be shared at all. Oh, and Carol, I did put in the link to the Grammarly commercial I had in mind. In case I don't get to show it now. But let's see. All right, so I'm a little off. It's released 3 weeks ago, and on YouTube it has just under 11 million.
Wow.
They're very Yeah, they just kind of pump them out. I think I might be thinking of a different platform. Maybe it wasn't YouTube where it kind of took off even more. But yeah, Grammarly are superhuman because they're not Grammarly anymore.
Anyone wants to post or get turn on the mic and say something that they would never. Oh, here we go. We got one. Okay, Gina writes, I can't make this concrete and I refuse to offload the personal connections with students and adjustments I make to let them know I see them and I am present with them. Wow, yeah, that's a great one. The human connection, the human relationship with your students.
Yeah, I feel like that captures a lot of a lot of the things that I'm thinking about that I refuse to upload.
Grading, I see now, that's another one, right? Using AI to grade for, or I'm seeing companies, even the learning management system companies are looking into ways to analyze the submissions so that it offloads the grading to the AI. That's one I'm noticing happen now.
Yeah, that's something I would love to talk about because it's coming to Canvas. I don't think it
Oh
has
yes,
yet.
Canvas has it.
Oh, do they have it? Yeah, I think it depends. I haven't seen it pop up in mine yet. It might depend on like level of access or whatever. Um, but yeah, right now, Canvas and other LMSs are working in an AI grader. You can find these. Grammarly has one too, right? So Grammarly, if you ever want to take a look at it, a student can upload work, upload a rubric, tell the program who is teaching it so they can put in Jason Gulya. It will look at my rate my professors. It will do a web search for me. It will create a profile based off of what it sees, and it will try to write comments and grades in my voice, right? So it'll say something like, "We
Wow.
think Jason Gulya is going to give it a 91. This is what I think he's going to say based off of what he has written online," right? And so there's that, which students have free access to, at least a little bit of access to. And then Canvas has their own that they're working in. And so the idea is that a student submits work and the professor gets a suggested grade, and suggested feedback. And one of the things I'm trying to push Canvas to really, really think about is that, even because it's marketed as first pass feedback, right? You can always reject it, you can revise it. But the problem is we have anchoring bias. We have, the fact that you can't unsee it, right? If you go and then suddenly the program gives it a 93 and you read it, oh, I really would have given this a 70, right? You can't unsee that feedback. It's already there in your mind. And so, yeah, that's something I think they need to think more about. I don't know if I have an answer to that yet.
Yeah, it's almost like it makes the professor think, am I grading wrong here?
Yeah.
What am I doing that's wrong? I'm way off. I would have given them a 70, but you're telling me give them a 90? You know, I think Carol has her hand up.
Hi, Jason, thank you. This has been so interesting.
You're very
I
welcome.
just have a few observations. I have difficulty with the like colleges making policies, and it's like not one policy will fit everyone. There's different disciplinary differences. Just the way that that's talked about, it seems to me that it seems like everyone is equal in this discussion. But CUNY, our campuses are pouring millions of dollars into supporting AI. So I feel like it's not an equal playing field for people who we're there's a sort of we're forced into it. So that's just one
No.
observation. Another observation, I'm in the English department. I've always been focused on process, getting students like revision. I always talk about my key goals in the class up front in the first week, and it's always about revision. And I've had to stop doing revision because that's the point at which people use Grammarly. They will write their own first
Yeah.
draft and then they'll use Grammarly and it just totally undermines revisions. I've had to stop that. And what the essays I used to teach with multiple revisions, I now get them to write just like that professor you described in a blue book, one shot deal. So
Yeah.
that, I mean, I know we're supposed to be changing our concepts of what happens in the classroom, but I haven't gotten there yet. Just a third observation, in all this discussion, I feel like, okay, so I need to develop my own personal relationship with like generative AI or ChatGPT. So just for fun, because it pops up on our email with Copilot, I started asking Copilot questions. I started with where were you born? And then I asked, where did you grow up? And then I've asked, where did you go to high school? I've shared it with a few of my colleagues, and one colleague responded, like one part of like the response to where are you born? She said, that's terrifying. You should try it.
What did it say? Do you remember like what the responses were like? Like did it
I wish I had it at my fingertips. I will, I'm trying to remember who I sent it to because that's how I could pull it up. But when I got these responses, I'm thinking uh, this is what we are teaching our students to have an ethical relationship with. Um, okay, so with let's see if I can. This is the answer to where did you grow up?
Oh, it's on the chat. Okay.
Oh yeah, put it in the chat.
Yeah.
So the two bullet points, Jose, I think you know Nina Bennett in English. She thought those 2 bullet points were just chilling. And yeah, so thank you. I feel like,
That it
and
like
I also am just so concerned. I'm the chapter chair of our union. We just had an AI forum about AI in the CUNY workplace, like its implications for labor and for the environment. That
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
interesting. That talk this past Tuesday has been recorded. So if anybody's
Oh,
interested, I could share.
thank you. Thank you, Carol.
yeah. It's so I was reading the response from this is ChatGPT, right? Oh, sorry, no, it's
Co-pilot.
Copilot. Copilot.
Yeah.
You said that. Yeah, how much it reflects it back on you. Um, yeah, which is weird. And I think too, in the background here, this conversation about, I think it's really important, right? Especially when we think about environmental concerns, ethical concerns. Students have them too, right? And one of the questions is what happens where a student just says, AI is not a part of my process. I don't want it to be a part of my process. And this is where I'm a little bit different than some other people who are in the space. I try to honor that as much as I can, as much as I can. So and this is why, I'm a big believer in scaffolds that really give students a lot of agency.
Mhm.
So, and they get to decide where AI is in the process. So I actually build in the option of refusal in that very process, right? A student might say, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and AI is not a part of my process. And here's why. And my response is great, right? Like you're thinking about how you're creating a process that works best for you. And so and I think we can create scaffolds that do exactly that sort of work, right? And as long as student is thinking, in a very analytical way that, they don't want to use AI for certain things. Like, and I think the big I won't say problem, but the issue we might run into is like how to manage that, right? And that's why I
Right.
try to make them as agency rich as I possibly can,
Right.
because I will have students who will say like, I don't really have the ability right now to use ChatGPT without losing my voice, and I want to talk about that, right? And for many of us, like, and I mean, that's actually sort of what Jose is prompting us to think about, right? What things don't we really use AI for, right? And one of mine is writing. Writing. I don't like writing with AI because I need the process of writing the letters and the words and
Right.
building things out, because that's how my mind has been able to work, right? I still write a lot on with pen and paper, right?
Yeah.
Because I need that. And then what has been called distant writing, when you're using a large language model and just creating and reprompting, it doesn't do that sort of work for me. And so I very well might have a student who comes in and thinks that. Not all of them will think that,
Right.
but some. And then I try to allow for that. And the other thing that I changed in my teaching is, probably half a year to a year after ChatGPT came out, I was doing disclosure statements. Right, if a student used AI, they had to disclose it, they give links, whatever. And so one of the things that I changed was I said, well, we're not going to do disclosure statements. We're just going to do transparency statements. And everyone's going to do them. Everyone, whether you used it or not, right? I still want you to analyze what you did. If you didn't use AI, cool. Let's analyze why you didn't use AI, right? And
Right.
so kind of having everyone do that, regardless of their level of use, has been very, very helpful for me, because then it's just about transparency and process. Whereas for me, if you're just saying, well, here's an additional step if you use AI, it has that punitive feel to it. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, I would love to be a fly on the wall when those conversations are happening in the classroom, because I can imagine I'm sure, Jason, you heard it all, maybe, right? From the students, like those who are not using, or the reasons why they're not, or environmental reasons. I mean, I would love just to hear. I mean, that's a great opportunity, Carol, to bring that into the classroom, and you'll be like just and that again builds, like we were talking about before, Jason, the relationships, right? Because you're creating this safe place, a safe environment within the classroom, just to talk about it all, just to talk and see where your students are in regards to the using of AI or not using it, and they have great reasons, and that's what you want to hear them talk about. Yeah,
And that's where the ability to build community, the ability to build rapport for students, I mean,
that's really
that's the key. That's the
that,
key to, I
that's
think,
it.
making all of this work,
Yeah,
right? There's all these conversations about this is how you can do assessment design to make it AI proof or AI resistant, to have them go through the process, and all of that is fine. But honestly, the biggest tool we have for getting students to lean into something like hard work, have those conversations, have them open, be transparent, is the relationship between student and professor. That is the biggest tool we have. It is not foolproof. It's not like, we can do it for everything and satisfy everything, but I think it is the biggest, most underestimated tool we have, whether we're teaching online or on site.
You know what? I saw this somewhere. I can't remember where, but I saw someone write something to the effect that the humanities had been kind of like, almost like being defunded in some way, or like seeing the number of enrollment decrease. But AI has really become the moat around the humanities have become the moat around AI, really, because now we're seeing, employers and we're seeing looking for these skills, and that's what these students are getting from the humanities, is really those soft skills that are being sought after: the critical thinking, the being able to communicate your ideas, being able to think outside the box and solve these problems. I think before we're getting towards the end, but I just want to thank you, Jason. I mean, you're phenomenal. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate you and the time that you took to be with us. I strongly encourage anyone to. Is it okay? They can find you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, find me, message me. I can even give you my phone number if you want. Like if you want to chat, let's chat. It's so hard to be in silos right now.
Yes.
It's really like we can't stay isolated. This is hard stuff. It's
We
really,
need
really
each
difficult.
other. We need each other. And
Yeah.
I think that's the reason why these talks, we need everyone at the table. And that's why the AI at us at CUNY or City Tech, we put together a round discussion series. It's really for that purpose, is to get everyone from all different angles as to how they see AI and teaching and learning, is just to come to the table and have a talk. Because if we allow these companies, like you mentioned Einstein AI, I wasn't aware of the one you mentioned, Kira.
Yeah, KRRA. I think this happened. When did they break it? April 21st, so like a week and a half ago, something like that.
Wow. Okay, that's hot off the press. I wasn't aware of that one yet. You see, you didn't post that one. I haven't.
I know. I didn't post that one. I know. They're popping up, right? I think that the one of the things that we assumed was, or many of us assumed, was that Einstein is gone. All right, awesome. We can move on with our day. But like
Right.
we lose touch with just. I mean, one, Einstein wasn't doing anything new. You could do a lot of that with an AI browser. But yeah, other companies filled space, right? Einstein got a lot of press. Got a lot of press. We
I
gave it press. So someone's gonna fill it.
Yeah, another head will pop up and then they'll chop that head off, and then you heard it from Jason himself. Find him on LinkedIn, friend him and ask him all the questions. Also, buy his book. It's great. I put the link on Amazon, but you can also find it from his website. I posted the link as well on the chat. And I think we will end right on the dot. Jason, again, thank you so much. I wish we could have you again. Come talk to us, or maybe in person. You're not too far away. You're in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, I'm in New Jersey. We have a campus in like central Manhattan, so I'm
Okay.
not far.
We're in Brooklyn, so
That's not too far.
not too far away. So we'll buy you lunch and we'll do something. But thanks
I'll
again for
I'll I'll do it for free parking.
oh my gosh, parking in downtown Brooklyn. Oh boy.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know. I
you know
know that's
what?
a big ask.
We have some great pizza, some great pizza spots here in Brooklyn. So we'll find something that you'll enjoy. So we'll definitely have you back, and hopefully in person. And again, thank you for all that you do, and to all these, and put these ideas up for free. I mean, you don't see that. People put those behind paywalls. So I really appreciate that you're doing that, and you're very forward thinking. And so I thank you for all that, and thank you for the time you put today, and thank you everyone for joining us. And I'll see you all next semester. We'll continue the AI roundtable discussions for the next semester. So thank you all and have a great rest of your weekend. Take care, everyone.
Everyone.